G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and in this video I'm going to show you what happens when you bury kitchen scraps in the garden. We'll dig down and find out how these scraps are going after being buried for a period. Not only that, but we'll also check out the pros and cons of burying other things too, such as pigeons, chickens, fish heads, leftover meats, etc. Let's get into it. Most of the time when people mention kitchen scraps and gardening, they think of compost piles, compost bins / tumblers, worm farms or chickens, and they're all good. But many people don't realise the other eco-friendly way to recycle your kitchen scraps, and it could be the easiest method of them all, depending on your situation, and that is to simply bury them directly into the garden. My grandparents buried their kitchen scraps in the garden just like I'm doing now, and it used to be a really popular thing back 30 to 40 years ago because, you know, it was practical. It saved on garbage space, but more importantly, it was a no-cost way to help to enrich the garden beds for better crops, since just about every backyard back then had a vegetable garden. How does this process work though? And honestly, haven't we moved on to better methods of recycling kitchen waste? Second question first. As I stated earlier, there are other ways such as compost piles, worm farms, or feeding to the chooks. However, direct bury circumvents them all, like a shortcut, or cutting out the middleman by turning your whole garden into a recycling area. Whilst I reckon the direct bury method is an excellent way to recycle, there are some things that you should be aware of. You should bury the scraps down at least 20 to 40 centimetres so that there's enough soil on top for subsequent vegetables to grow. You must be careful not to bury too much kitchen waste in the one garden bed, or you'll end up overwhelming that area or that bed and turn it into a compost pile, and then the plants won't grow well at all because of the decomposing matter. And you do need a fair-sized garden, or you might quickly run out of space, since kitchen scraps can take weeks to months to properly break down and get eaten by worms, other small animals or microbes. Speaking of breaking down, let's get back to the first question, and that is, how does this process work? Well, think of your garden as a huge worm farm, and when you bury your kitchen scraps somewhere in your vegetable patch, you're feeding the worms. The worms don't just eat and break down the scraps into matter that can be absorbed by the plants. They also produce their own waste through castings, worm poop, and worm juice, worm pee or digestive liquid, and these elements are excellent for providing the nutrients your plants need to thrive. You're basically growing your plants on top of a worm farm, and I think that's cool. The other thing about the dig and bury method is that you can practically bury any scraps, not just fruit and veg, but also meat and bones, if the conditions are right where you are. And what I mean by that is you probably don't want to be burying meat and bones in great quantities because it might start to smell up the place. Or if you've got a dog that likes to dig, it could become a real problem also. But in small amounts, and if you have a large enough space, burying some bones and meat leftovers won't hurt at all. However, trying to compost them down the conventional way isn't quite as easy, and I personally don't recommend it. I've known gardeners who swear by fish heads and fish bones in the vegetable garden. They reckon it's particularly good for tomato plants. They say if you bury a good-sized fish head about a foot down and then start a tomato seedling on top, it'll grow like the best ever tomatoes you could ever imagine. I've buried fish frames in our raised beds before, but I can't say that I've experimented or tested the direct growing effects on tomato plants. Perhaps one day I'll test the theory out to see if there's anything fishy about it. I buried a pigeon in this garden bed here that I found on our back lawn. I'm not sure how it came to grief, but I buried him here about 18 months ago. And since then, I've grown a ton of onions in this very raised bed. So maybe that had something to do with it. Let's have a dig down and see if there's anything remaining of our old pigeon mate. All right, it was right here. I reckon she was about a foot down. Oh, it's a nice big beetle grub. Check that out. I'll feed that to the chickens. Worms. I'm digging down with my hands because it'd be so much more effective on camera if I grabbed a handful of something icky. You know what? There's nothing there. I could probably go all day. Found another grub. Yeah, nearly 2 years on, and I didn't really expect to find anything, to be honest. The worms and the microbes would have eaten him completely by now, and he's just turned into the surrounding soil. There might be the odd bone scattered around somewhere, but you know, I'm not going to go digging up a garden bed all day to try to find it. But you know, it's a good thing, isn't it? I also buried some banana peels about 5 weeks ago, right in this very same bed, after we'd made a fantastic banana cake bread from our magnificent bananas. We've had a really good summer of nanas this year. So let's dig down and see how they're going. Right here they were. It's another one of those beetle grubs. That'll go to the chickens. You know what? I can't find them either. But banana skins are pretty soft, so they probably got snapped up and eaten by worms and these types of grubs pretty quickly. We might have some better luck in this old timber bed here. About a month ago exactly, I buried some corn cobs in the base here, and corn cobs are a little harder and more fibrous, so I'm expecting that we should at least see something here after only 4 weeks, so we'll give that a go. The story behind this corn is I had some excess older corn that had dehydrated down a bit because it hadn't been eaten, and it wasn't much good for us to eat, so I rehydrated it and fermented it at the same time in some water for about a week to give to our hens as a natural probiotic. They loved it. But now I'm keen to see how this goes, and from memory I think I also buried one full cob of corn that I forgot to give to the hens. Well, I can see plenty of worms already. There's a piece of corn. Now I buried that a lot further down. This has been pushed up for some reason. But yeah, she's very easy to break up in the hand. There's another piece. But it's all hollowed out. Yeah, I found it. Look at the worms around it. Here's the cob. You can see all these little red wigglers. Not sure if you can. See the little red wigglers? All coming out the side, and there's even some type of maggot there. It's probably some type of a fruit or something maggot. Well, that's a really good result. I'm glad I was able to show you that, because I was worried that I'd dig down and find nothing, and I couldn't prove that. At least, look, I can see right through that. I can see through the middle of it. So they're eating out the core of it first, and you can see how easy it is to break down. A normal cob of corn, there's a little worm there, wouldn't be that easy to break up, but they're reducing down and they're getting slowly eaten by microbes and worms, And yeah, I'm rapt I was able to show you that type of example, because it just goes to show that even just after 4 weeks, it gets to work pretty quick in your garden bed. Whereas, you know, you could be doing your compost pile or your tumbler and it can take a lot longer actually to break down. There's plenty of worms here. I'm just putting all this back. There's lots of worms in this particular area of the garden, but then there's lots of worms in our whole garden too, but they're particularly concentrated, of course, where you have extra food for them. And you can see what I mean now by planting on top of this. There would be no problems at all for plants' roots going down. They wouldn't be impeded at all by the activity going on underneath the surface, and they'd grow quite normally. Sometimes I use kitchen scraps as extra fill when I'm creating a new raised garden bed. And this gets the soil ecosystem off to a great start by encouraging worm and microbes, because remember, the best and healthiest garden soil is alive and teeming with activity. And that's what happens when you bury kitchen scraps in the garden. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a big, dirty thumbs up. And also subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Now, where did I put my glasses? I'm only joking. Hey guys, I've got a special treat. Don't keep greedy now, there's enough for everyone.